Hi, Pasquale. Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Pierce. I'm an instructor in the biology department, and this is my presentation on strategies, strategies to improve accessibility in my Bio 104 class. First, before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Pasquale for facilitating this class again. It's been something I've been meaning to take for quite some time. And I'm really glad that I was able to do it in the online format. And while there are certainly things that I think would have been richer experiences if we had been together with each other in person, I understand that this also sort of worked well as a course to facilitate online. So it's been a really good experience. And again, I just wanted to thank Pasquale for putting this together for us. So let me tell you a little bit more about my course and some of the strategies that I am going to implement, or I hope to implement, when trying to make this course more accessible for students. So first things first is the course I chose to do this accessibility audit for is once again the Bio 104 course, which is our environmental lab biology course. This course is a course that meets gen ed requirements. So it's a science with lab course, so any student can take it to meet that requirement for their degree. So what I mostly end up with is a variety of non-majors students, students who have a lot of varied interests and abilities, and it's been a really great class to teach. I teach it in both the spring and fall semester, and I typically have 4 sections of the class, which equates to about 100 students. This class is a unique class in the sense that it is lab heavy. We have a 3-hour and 20-minute lab once a week. It includes a lot of being outside, a lot of time outdoors, a lot of walking around campus and collecting data and things such as that. And then we actually have a relatively short lecture period. We only meet for 50 minutes twice a week, so it's very fast-paced. So looking at this course, doing the course audit, I was thinking of this course sort of in 2 different ways. I had to look at barriers to students in my lecture component of the course, and also barriers that students might encounter in the lab portion of the course. And so the strategies that I have selected are those that potentially would work for either or. There aren't a lot of strategies that work for both, but really it is looking at ways to make my lecture more accessible and ways to make my lab more accessible. So some of the barriers that I brainstormed in my audit as far as the lecture portion of the course would go, again, because it's only 50 minutes twice a week, it's very fast-paced. We have a lot of information that we cover in a relatively short amount of time, and that can be a barrier to learning if students are not comfortable with that type of pace. We do a lot of group activities. Those group activities also typically require some sort of reading and reflection and discussion, which, again, put on the spot, read these 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then respond with students accordingly, which can again put students in an uncomfortable position. And then also we do have large group discussions, but there's limited time for discussions that could be seen as, you know, what I'm going to call extraneous, things that might be slightly off topic or things that might be on topic but go into greater detail in some way. We don't have a lot of time for that. As far as barriers in lab go, it's exclusively group-based lab work, which means everyone has to work together with lab members. These labs are very detailed and there's lots of written instructions. And once again, we have very physical requirements. We take off-site field trips. We're outside on almost a weekly basis, going around campus, wading into ponds and streams and using equipment and collecting data. So there are a lot of things that could potentially be barriers to learning for certain groups of students. So how can I improve access? When I was going through the audit, I decided that there were 4 groups that I think I can make an immediate difference and impact for. So those 4 groups that I selected are the students with learning disabilities, students with anxiety disorders, students who have an autism spectrum disorder, and students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And when I was doing my audit and I was creating an action plan based on it, I was trying to think of strategies that could work for multiple groups rather than just a single group. So again, is there something I can do that would work for a lot of people rather than just a small select few? And also, can these strategies be implemented in multiple modalities? Right now, currently, obviously, we're all using online teaching. We don't know how long that's going to continue. We know it will happen in the spring, but beyond that, we are not sure. I'd like to think that sometime in the next year, we will get back to the classroom, but I also want to make sure that if we are not in the classroom in the near term, that there are still some changes that I can make that are still impacting students even in an online environment. So my first strategy actually is looking at my textbooks. So I use I traditionally had a textbook for lecture and then a lab manual. I've recently just this semester made the switch to using OER resources. It's not one distinct textbook. I couldn't find one that fit for my class, so I'm using an OER reading list. But what I like about it is that students can access it, of course, for no cost to them, and that these materials can either be read in their web browser, or they can also all be accessed through a PDF download, which I think again makes for greater accessibility for a group of students. I'd also like to in the future work with our lab manual publisher, and right now we only have a hard copy of the lab manual available, but in the future I would like to see that also available in an online platform. I believe our publisher does have an online platform to provide lab materials for, so I'd like to explore that further to make sure that students actually can have their iPads with them in class with their labs there, and they can actually just sort of write right on the screen there, which again, I had a student last fall who used that accommodation, and we worked that out, and it seemed to work very well for him. Strategy number 2, posting assignments early. So oftentimes in lecture, I will have these group assignments that I say, okay, get in groups and read this page or read these paragraphs that I've posted on the board, and then talk to each other. So for certain students that might not read quickly or need to read things multiple times in order to have good comprehension, or even students who are anxious about, sort of reading and responding on the spot, something that I can do to make things easier is to post those assignments ahead of time. So I can post them on Blackboard the day before and say, tomorrow in class, this is our small group activity. Please make sure that you've read this information before you get to class so you know what we're going to discuss. This also would make it easier if students miss class, students who, have chronic illnesses, or students who have anxiety or depression issues or other things that might keep them away from class. This would also make it possible for them to make up those assignments that they've missed because they've been posted online. Group work. We do a lot of group work in my class, both in lecture and in lab. In lecture, and I know not everybody's great with group work, so in lecture, what I can do is I can give students the option of completing assignments on their own. So while I encourage group work and I'd love to see them working together, I just noticed that I'm covering up all my little pictures here. Sorry. While I'd love to see them working together, I also recognize that that is not in everybody's comfort zone. And so turning in those assignments individually is fine too. In lab, we can't do that. Our work is exclusively done in groups. That's because of equipment sharing and things like that. I just don't have enough supplies for everyone to do their own thing. So we work in cooperative groups. And some of the things that I can do to make that easier on some students, especially students who, again, may be uncomfortable working in groups, is I can provide lab roles, pre-assigned lab roles that say, this week, here are the lab roles. We need a materials manager, we need a recorder, we need a timekeeper, and we need someone who's reading the instructions for us. So if I provide those roles to the group and say, look, I need each person to complete one of these roles, students can feel comfortable knowing what they're contributing to the group. And then week by week, if they'd like to change, they can pick a new role. Or if there are students who are very comfortable being the materials manager and that's their role every week, we could do it that way too. So again, the idea here is to create a workable group dynamic, especially for students who might struggle working in groups to begin with. Strategy number 4, lab instructions. So lab instructions are very detailed, and there's typically multiple steps that students have to complete to get to the end of the lab. One thing I can do to make things easier is to summarize some of the things on board. So there's sort of an overview when they come in. They know exactly what's going on and the pace and timing of the class. And another thing that I can do is, again, because it's a lot of reading and not everybody's good with reading on the spot, is I can verbally go over some of those instructions. So I can say, okay, for activity 1, let's talk through some of these steps together. These are the important things you need to keep in mind. And that way, if I do that several times during the class, sort of bringing everyone back together, verbally going through assignments and instructions, I can hopefully keep everybody sort of on task, and also help alleviate some of that anxiety that some people might feel with trying to keep up with all of these detailed instructions. And then last but not least, lecture videos. Had a lot of experience posting videos online, of course, for the online courses right now, but even in the future, I can see a role for these lecture videos. It'd be a good place to post information for students to review, students who were in class but maybe didn't catch something, or students who had trouble focusing for whatever reason. They can go back to the lecture video and watch it another time. It's there. And then once again, it also works for students who had to miss for any variety of reasons. And then of course, for my deaf and hard of hearing students, I want to make sure that everything's captioned. So any videos that I show in class or any videos that are posted online, I want to make sure that those are fully captioned for them so that they know that they're not missing out on any information. So that was just a quick overview. There are some other strategies I included in my accessibility plan as well. But in general, what I found really fascinating about this process is some steps to creating accessibility were kind of very intuitive and straightforward. So once you're presented with these, the barriers students face, you're like, oh, great, I know how to overcome that. I can do this, this, and this. And so those are the things that I tried to tackle first. Lots of these strategies can help students with a variety of disabilities. It's not just a this fits you and this fits you and this fits you approach. It's let's do what we can to make it accessible for a large group of people. And last but not least, there's always rooms for improvement. So these are the strategies I'm going to start with, but these certainly aren't the strategies that I'm going to finish with. There are always more things that can be done, and hopefully as we go along, I'll learn more about those as well. So once again, thanks very much. It was a great class, and I'm excited to put some of these things in action.